Let's go to the Wizards to kick things off with the Beltway beat. And we're going to be recapping their last week of action. And, well, not a lot of W's in the column for them here.
Zero W's.
Yeah, exactly. They had a 94-125 loss against Orlando, then a 102-119 loss at New York, and then a 136-107 loss at Boston, which brings their record to 1-7 on the season. Not great. Could be better. Could be, well, can't really be worse because everyone else at the bottom only has one win as well. So, Troy, let me just ask you, what's been your takeaways over the last week?
Well, this is the part of the season which is very early. That the reality of what we have to expect to come is like kind of setting in, and so where I think the first week or two of the Wizards season, there was this cautious sense of optimism because they were playing in close games and they had a 19-point lead versus the 76ers and the young players were kind of thriving and we were like, maybe this team can be something. And then this past week has been like a gut reality check where they've just really got the belt taken to them, and all of these games over the last week. There were no close games. Like they got blown out in every single game. And, I don't think that, they were competitive in the majority of those basketball games. And so, as far as what we expected coming into the season, I think that, like I said, the reality is really kind of just settling in. And, I think that, the fan base is just really getting caught up on that.
Yes, absolutely right there. As you said, the team had a pretty strong first three games of the season, I'd say. They had the one win, but the two losses that they had, they at least looked semi-competitive in those games. And since then, just about everyone on the roster has that hard reality check, except really with the exception of Sarr. He still is seemingly making these kind of strides forward. But everyone else, including Keyshawn George, who had an excellent first three games this season, is sort of normalizing out. But I have this question to ask you, Isaac. Is this what the team is going to be for the rest of the season?
If they want to keep that protected first round pick, yeah, it should be. I mean, I don't. With as much as you want to look at with all the semantics of like, oh man, you want them to win some games, you have to be realistic here. They're in developmental mode and rebuilt mode, and I think people keep losing the main thing of that. This year, they're not supposed to win. So if they're not winning, that's great for us. You're trying to keep our draft picks. If they do win, that's great because they're growing and developing. We stay even kill and keep on that main thing. Is like, hey, look, this is what it's supposed to be. It's the reality of it.
Well, let's talk about the goal is development, right? Mm-hmm. Let's talk about some of that development. Troy, what have you seen from, let's just start with Keyshawn George over the past week compared to how he started the season?
Well, I've seen other NBA teams make adjustments with their scouting report and their coverages and how they are guarding Keyshawn George. And so I think that when the season first started, he was seeing a lot of one-on-one coverage, and I think that opposing teams were a little bit taken aback by how aggressive he was with his ball handling and playmaking skills. But now the teams have got they got some game film on them, got some tape on them. And so they're throwing double teams. They're hedging, on the pick and roll, trying to force the ball out of his hands earlier. And so, I think that this will be an adjustment period for him. Once you start showing that you have certain skills, then, the NBA, they're very good at, trying to cut your water off. And so, I think that, his season is going to be constantly trying to zig when everybody else is zagging against, his growth and development.
Right. This is where the real growth comes in, is can he rise above these adjustments that teams are making? One thing that should be noted is, the proof is in the numbers for him that it is started to normalize. This past week, he was only averaging 13.5 points, a little over 3 rebounds and 2 assists. But the thing that's most notable to me, what has been a through line to the entire season to this point for him, has been the fouls. Yeah. That's one thing I think we really need to pay attention to, because in the past week, he had 2 games in which he had 5 fouls. And since the start of the season, 6 of the 8 games he's played in, he's had 5 fouls in. So, Troy, I need to ask, is this an indication of anything? And is this something that should even be concerned about for this stage of his career?
I wouldn't say it's concerning for this stage of his career. But, it is something to note that the fact that, it's first of all, it's hard to develop if you can't be on the court. And if you're constantly fouling, and then you're putting Brian Keefe in a position where he now has to manage your playing time and when you can go into the games, and and it also takes away from his aggressiveness, because I think that one of the things that I love what I've seen from him as far as his growth on the offensive end. But I love the fact that he's been aggressive on the defensive end, going out there getting blocks and steals. And so now with him, really not being able to control, his physicality, and being able to control, being able to stay on the floor. I think that that's something that he really needs to work on in order to have his game reach that optimal level.
Right. Well, and this is, as you said, they kind of need that physical aggression on the defensive end,
Yeah.
right? If anyone will recall, when the season opener happened against Milwaukee, he was the one who took the lead on the defensive front of trying to guard Giannis, which, I mean, kind of crazy, all things considered, by size difference. But that hunger that exists in him to try to be the lockdown guy, to try to be the point of attack defender, is something that the Wizards are going to need in crunch time, as not only this year progresses, but just in the long-term future of this team. And you made an excellent point there. When Keefe is trying to figure out the minutes rotation toward the end of these games, and he sees that his most aggressive defender already has 5 fouls with 10 minutes left in the game, it's like, well, he can't play for the bulk of the last 10 minutes because they can't really risk that. So it is absolutely something that I hope he can start to make adjustments to, but the offensive end is really where he's going to have a lot of work to do. As you said, the defenses are really trying to play specifically to his strengths now, and they're now realizing he can be a real weapon. What can we do to stop him?